Now we're recording, Rabbi.
All right, so I just want to point out Hashgacha Pratis. When it comes around, you got to point it out. Today's Tanya is the exact discussion that we had yesterday in class regarding whether or not the Orin Sof gets down here in this world when we do a mitzvah. Remember this conversation we had? That we're saying that really it comes down in the sense that in some untangible way, we were saying, it's in this world, you're doing a mitzvah, you can see the Ratzon of Hashem being performed, but the real light of the mitzvah gets put in a box in Atzilus. Remember that? So he speaks today in the Tanya about this Inyan, and he brings down the same pasuk that we did, Tzidkaso Omedes La'ad, which his righteousness stands forever. And the Rabbi points out, he explains it there differently than it's normally explained in the whole Chassidus. That he says over there, that here we said, Tzidkaso Omedes La'ad means that his righteousness stands forever, bifnei atzmo, like in a sort of different class of light, in Atzilus, we said this yesterday in the Maimer, in Atzilus, that it's really from a higher source of Atzilus, and you pull it down in Atzilus from doing a mitzvah, and it's sort of standing there, waiting for Tchias HaMesim. Here in the Tanya today, he says that it's Omedes is a Lashon Nekeva, it's a feminine word, and so is Tzedakah. And what's the idea of feminine? He says that really what happens when you do a mitzvah in this world, particularly with Tzedakah, is that you make a kli. That's the meaning of feminine, is it's a makabel. And the light of the Or Ein Sof, it is kind of waiting in the higher worlds, but the kli that you made is actually built in this world physically forever. So in other words, that you make the keli, and then in the future will be revealed the light that's in that kli. But ultimately, he goes on great length to explain that it actually is in this world, because making the goof of the thing is basically having the thing. Once you have the arm, you have the chayas and the life force that's in the arm. You can't see it at this particular juncture. Anyway, pretty much exactly what we spoke about yesterday. That's what today's Tanya. You'll read it for yourselves. You see, but it's right where we left off. Anyway, it's actually the last letter in the whole Tanya. The last
Igeres HaKodesh.
Last Igeres HaKodesh, which with it concludes the Tanya. Okay. Anyway, where do we leave off? We started saying that there's a basic difference between the light which is for the sake of the worlds, the Kav, and the light which is Besod Tosefes, which is an add-on, which comes from the Or Ein Sof. We spoke about it in its source, that it went up in Hashem's will to bring forth these hidden 10 spheros, and sort of designated a space inside the Or Ein Sof, where that's going to be eventually, when the Tzimtzum happens, and so for the source of the worlds. And we said, it went up in his mind, and therefore it must be that there was this Or Ein Sof was there even before it went up in his mind. So it's called the Chitzonius and the Penimius of the Or Ein Sof. The Penimius of the Or Ein Sof is the level of light which preceded these 10 spheros, even in the will. And so, this is the source of what's called Sod Shoresh and Sod Tosefes. The ultimate source of the light of the Kav is from that 10 spheros of will that originally went up in Hashem's mind, and the infinite light which is beyond those 10 spheres is what's called added on, an add-on, something which is beyond the measure that the Kav originally had in mind for the world. So how do you draw this down? We said you can see it openly in different places. In the Beis HaMikdash, you had a light which is beyond the measurement of the Seder Ishtashlus. In the Wakum Aaron Eino Min Amida, the Aron itself, and you had all the Eser Nisim that were happening in the Beis HaMikdash. And he said the truth is this happens anytime you do a mitzvah, you're grabbing onto this light which is beyond measure. It's Tosefet light. And then we got into an interesting discussion where we left off, and I want to pick up there. Which is, we can take it everyone from inside page Ayin Vav. It's about 10 lines from the bottom, and the end of the line is there's a sugrayim. What do you call it? It says 8:16 parentheses. Excuse me. And it says Kamosha Kosov parentheses 8:16 Kamosha Kosov b'makom acher, as it says elsewhere. The Torah mitzvahs Hagam shem gam kim b'chinas medida, even though they too have measure. And of course, every mitzvah has unbelievable measure, right? Infinite laws which describe the particulars of how you measure a mitzvah. And if you're out of that boundary, you don't do the mitzvah. But it's a different type of concept of measuring, as we said yesterday, of what we're dealing now with the kav, this measured light, right? Because the kav, I think Zvulun gave a nice analogy. I'll bring back here the idea that the space between me and this wall, right? You can measure it and divide it up infinitely, but there's also the idea of taking it and measuring it and taking pieces off, right? In other words, I can take this measurement, I can cut it up into pieces and reduce pieces, or I could just cut it up into millions of pieces and divide it and redivide it, and I don't really reduce anything. And the idea is that where does the reduction come from? Right? To reduce the light, it's basically a force that's happening upon the light from some other place, which is putting a limitation on the light. And that's the idea of the light of the kav. As the light of the kav goes down the pike, from Atzilus to Bria, Tzir, etc., something is reducing it and literally minimizing it. So it's not just measuring it in a theoretical way where it's sort of implicitly showing that it has measure, but it's reducing it with its measure. So every time it goes down another measure, you get one less measure of light in there. Whereas when it comes, and let's read it inside for a second. So he said that the Torah mitzvahs, even though it's measure, it's not the measure of miyut ha'or. It doesn't limit it from level to level. Like the measuring of the Seder Ishtoshlu does. Every time you go down a world, there's less. Move on to etzem inyan madida who gam came ba'ofen achem madida d'ishtoshlu. Therefore, the essential measuring is in a completely different way. It's the same word, but it's a completely different concept of the measuring of the Seder Ishtoshlu. And why? The madida d'ishtoshlu hu sha'or nimdad v'nigbal al yedei davar hamoded umagbiloso. This is what I was trying to just describe. The measuring of the ishtalshlus is such that the light is measured and limited through a measurer and a limiter, which is limiting it. In other words, there's two things, right? There's the light and there's this other entity, which is having an effect on the light and making the light slowly go away. Now he says, sort of to not get the wrong idea, in a parenthesis within this parenthesis, obviously the one who's measuring the light is not something other than God. It's not even something other than the light, quite frankly, as we discussed at great length. So this is not therefore really a true limitation, because as the mashal we've been saying many times, the teacher limits his own mind to bring out a mashal that the student can understand. It's not a true limitation inside of the teacher. He still has all that previous information. Nevertheless, there is a limiter, right? Inside of his mind, in some capacity, something is removing areas of light so they're not shining. The reality is that it's not truly removed, but ki'im l'gabi makabim levad. It's only on from the standpoint of the receiver of the light that it's removed. The giver of the light is not removed, but the point is, we're talking about from the standpoint of the receiver. From the standpoint of the receiver, there's a true limitation in this light. And here you have light, here you don't have light. That's what it means to measure it. It means to subtract it and truly limit it. So measuring can be to limit something, but not necessarily does measuring necessarily mean to limit something. It could just be to describe the essential thing. That's what he goes on to say. About Madida, the Torah mitzvahs, Husha etzem moded umagbil es atzmo, is that the essence is limiting or measuring, I should say, or limiting itself. Lios atzmuso nimshach b'makom she'eino be'erech klal. And what does it mean? It's limiting. It's measuring itself. Why is it measuring itself? Not because it's reducing itself and taking parts of itself away, but it's measuring and limiting itself in order so that it itself, in its pristine state, unlimited, can be drawn down and found in a place which is of no comparison to it at all. So in other words, the essence stays exactly the same, but it gives itself a limit so that if you happen to be in a limited place, you still have access to the essence. Whereas the other limitation is that it makes the limited place. It reduces Hashem so that it makes places which are now limited and are not bearing the full light. Whereas this one, it is the full light. It just measures itself so that if you should happen to find yourself in a limited place, you have access through this measurement to bring the infinite light into that measured place. Make sense?
A muscle would help. You described it to Tosefet light. Yeah.
We're talking the mitzvah Tosefet light. Yes, a mashal would help. Okay, I mean, look, I guess put it like this. I don't know. I don't have like the real mashal, but I can just try and describe it in other terms. You have a flashlight, okay, and at the beginning where the flashlight is, it's very bright, and as it goes on and on, lower and lower, it gets less and less light. So at the bottom, now what is that? What's happening there? You have a limitation. What is limitation? I guess the molecules in the air, right? Something's blocking the light from continuing to spread the same intensity as it is in its source to the bottom. So there's something limiting the light, and quite frankly, you have less light at the bottom than you have light at the top. That's a true limitation. But let's imagine, for example, and this is where the mashal gets a little bit weird, because I don't think you can actually do this, but you would take the light at its source, and you would sort of divide it into different sections, so that no matter what space I am in the limited area of the world, I can still access this original light. If it doesn't limit itself, so then it's me being at the bottom of the food chain. I'm a limited being. If I don't have some form of limitation to grasp it with, I have no access to unlimited light. Being a finite being, I have no access to unlimited light. How did I get that way? Because light limited itself in order to make me a finite being, whereas the top of the food chain is an unlimited. But now here I am at the bottom of the food chain. I'm a created being. I have no access to unlimited light. So in the unlimited light itself, it intrinsically divides itself up into the ability to be held by a finite being. This is a different type of limitation because it's not making itself smaller. If the finite being will jimmy up a mitzvah and hold it in some limited form, it gets the same energy of light that's at the source. It's able to pull into this faraway place the same exact level of light which is at the source, because the light at the source also measured itself. But not measured itself in terms of the fact that it limited itself. It measured itself so that a limited being can also access it. It's a pretty crummy mashal, I must say.
What I don't understand, I just need to relate it to performing a mitzvah. So after, when you perform a mitzvah, then
So when you perform a mitzvah, what you're dealing with is the infinite light has enclosed itself into some very finite and measured terms. For example, you want to wear tefillin, they're going to be black, they're going to be square, they're going to have 4 boxes, etc., all the minute details. That's the intrinsic limitation that the infinite light puts on itself, so that me, being in a finite world, have access to unlimitedness. Because when I perform the function of creating perfect limitation in accordance with the instructions of the Or Ein Sof, the Or Ein Sof, as it is, unlimited, finds itself in that place. That's the idea. Okay.
Okay, so when you say that the Or Ein Sof limited itself, by measuring causes a limitation. I mean, if there's a measurement, there has to be a limitation. But the idea here is it's not how much it is that it is. And so no matter how little of it that we receive,
That's right.
The fact is that it is.
That's right.
And so then it is unlimited.
I hear what you're saying. In other words, it's not limiting itself so that the actual quality of the light changes. That's the difference. Quality versus quantity, right? The quality of each part of the limitation in the Torah, talking about the Tosefes, the Torah mitzvahs, you break it down into 100 parts. So you can say it's limited, except the difference is that the quality of each part is exactly the same as the quality of the whole.
Right. Because it is.
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas, when you go through the regular state of Rishtalshlus limitation, it's the exact opposite. Every step of the way, the quality of light changes dramatically from the level of light that you had ability to access before. So that limitation actually holds back the light from shining. Whereas this limitation does not hold back the light from shining. On the contrary, it enables the light to shine in another place.
Right. It reveals that the light is shining. So to take this to the flashlight analogy, that at the very end where the light is very weak,
right?
But it is light. No matter how dim it is light, just like it's light at its source.
No, but it's really a completely different level of light. In other
words, but it is light.
Fine, but it's light which has been limited, truly limited. Now, the truth is, you can find inside of this, let's kind of put all of our muscles together, because we talked about the idea that if you have a small amount of light, you can ultimately reach back to the great light.
Yeah.
But the idea is that you still do have a small amount of light. So the idea is when you do the mitzvah, what you're doing is that's your tool to crawl inside the small amount of light and unearth all the other higher levels of light to the point where you have the essence of the light, because you have this mitzvah of the tool of extraction. But don't confuse it. It was the small amount of light is different in quality and quantity than the big amount of light. It's just that it's a starting point at least. It gives you a reference place where you can stand now in this small place, but through a mitzvah, you can bring down the essential light back again.
But it is light.
But it's a different kind of light, right? It's not the essential light. And in fact, it's from a whole different source. That light comes from a different place. It comes from the external aspect of the Or Ein Sof. So even in its principal root, it's a different type of light. And that's why it makes things exist at different and lower levels. But upon that, you have ability at the end. By the way, this only is true at the end of the change. All the levels in between the beginning of the fleshlight and the end, they don't have mitzvahs. So only when you get to the bottom, you can finally fulfill the will of Hashem of opening up. And that's why we feed all the worlds. When we do a mitzvah and hatch this infinite light through this measured instrument that we have called a mitzvah, we bring the Or Ein Sof coming down through all the worlds. So like we said before, Atzilus itself gets a pick-me-up, because it's all of a sudden flooded in a light which is beyond all measure. Yeah.
So I have a question, especially there's a non-Jew doing the 7 laws produce the same light as we do when we do a mitzvah.
Not exactly, definitely not exactly, but there's a way that they are participating in this method. In other words, the idea is that the world is required to connect this circuit, right? You can't do a mitzvah without the world, without an esrog in your hand, without another Jew in a body that you can have Abbas Yisrael with. So any mitzvah, that's the thing. That's what Hashem made it with it. He says that it's staraf lehem abrios. He made the mitzvahs to partner the lowest world with the Eibishter. So you can't do a mitzvah without the lowest world. So the Jew is one half of that component. He sort of brings the light, but the body is the other half component. So the body could be an esrog. The body could be the body of a non-Jew, right? So once you doing a mitzvah with an esrog, the light is in you, your body, and the esrog. The whole thing is basically part of this infinite light, because you can't do the mitzvah of esrog without an esrog in your hand. So the esrog itself is part of the mitzvah. So the non-Jew is the same way. Him performing his mitzvahs ultimately does put him in this light, but not because his mitzvah is drawing down this light. His mitzvah really is just like the havdil. I don't know if you could say the havdil, but it's like any natural being fulfilling its natural task. In other words, a person should not kill, right? And so if he kills, he's really going against like his nature. Something like crooked got into him, right? So the 7 mitzvahs b'nei Noach, they're not like I'm quoting sort of from a Sicha and Chai Sarah we just had. The Rabbi says that they're not a thing in and of themselves. There's no value intrinsically in them. And he gives an interesting mashal. He says to Ephron Achiti, right, who was the owner previously of the Maras HaMachpelah before Avram bought it. Avram says, Ger v'toshev anochi imachem. I am a ger and a toshev. And Rashi says, what do you mean? They're opposites. A ger means I'm just passing through, I don't own this land. Or toshev means I'm the owner of the land. So Rashi says, I'm a ger. If you want, I'll pay for it. And if you don't want, I should pay for it. We have this nice little transaction. I'm a toshev. I'll take it minadin. In other words, it's my land. Hashem gave it to me. So just play your role and give me the land. I'll pay it for you. So the Rebbe says, what does this all mean? It's very strange. You're one or the other. In other words, if you're a toshev, just take it to the lechatchila from him. It's yours. If you're not, how can you? So he says like this. There's like a condition upon the non-Jews. If you're going to do your mitzvahs, so fine, I will include you in this transaction. And you'll be in the Torah. You'll be Ephron Achiti, who sold the land of the patriarchs to the patriarchs. So, and you're going to be like forever part of the Torah. That's what I'm saying. You'll be part of this light because you played your role. Literally, your name is in the Torah and your actions are in the Torah forever. You're part. But if not, if you don't want to do your 7 mitzvahs, you're not going to be in the Torah. Like you don't exist. He says the same thing about Besuel. It's the same parsha. Besuel was the father of Rivka, and he had a tremendous part to play. If it wasn't for him, we would have no Am Yisrael. But the second he tried to get in the way of the shidduch, he just disappears from the parsha. He's dead. He goes away. Rashi says miraculously he died. in the middle of the whole shidduch. Because if you're going to stand in the way of the Yiddishkeit, you have no place. Where that's not true by a Jew. The Jew is like, what you're doing is essentially important. We can't, you're not disposable. The non-Jew's mitzvah, what the Rebbe is saying there, maybe it sounds a little bit harsh, but it's disposable. In other words, if you do it, you can participate. You don't do it, we don't need you.
The other question I had, please, is this: if it's true that by doing a mitzvah we actually have access to the light of Atzilut, right? It's Atzilut. The light
Even more.
even higher.
Even higher.
How come is it that we can do a mitzvah and not feel anything? Surely anybody doing that mitzvah is supposed to be blown over and overwhelmed by the purity of the light, even if it's in a tiny portion that he can receive it.
No, because the truth is that the light is hiding. In other words, if it's hiding.
But the mitzvah brings it out.
The mitzvah brings it out, it's true. What the mitzvah brings out, look, even the regular light is hiding, right? Before we do a mitzvah, you're also made of divine light. Why aren't we freaking out from that? Because it's hiding, right? The underlying situation here is that there's divine light energizing us at every second. Mama's mystical experience, 24/7. Why aren't we all freaking out? Because it's hiding. And that's the nature of the tzimtzum. Hashem is wondrous, not only because He can reveal light, but because He can hide His light. So that's just fine, but that's just regular light, right? Now, there's another type of light, which is a light which is beyond creation. In other words, it's not only the light which enlivens beings, which is already pretty tops, if you ask me. Hashem has a light which can bring things into existence, but He has a light which is so great that it's beyond existence itself. So we can also access this light, but the fact of the matter is, even that light also, when it comes through the tzimtzum, you can't see it.
I thought it doesn't come through the tzimtzum. I thought it's directly from high up into us directly when we do the mitzvah.
But it comes through. In other words, even though it comes from a different source, it still comes through the same channels. It still comes through the same channels. But Penimius, in other words, we are changing the nature of the world when we do it. We can't feel it, but that's what he's saying. That's why I said in today's Tanya, I started off the class by explaining. He says it's like you're making a kli, right? So you have done something. You've changed the fabric of time and space. And it was before, in that area of the kav, there was only kav light. There was no kli bichlal to hold a light which was beyond the Seder Ishtalshlus. Those kelim did not exist there. When you do a mitzvah, you make that kli exist there. You change the nature of your body, the time and space fragment that you happen to be in. It's like forever changed because you created a different kli which can hold a light which is beyond creation. So when it comes time for the light to be seen in the end of days, that area of creation has been set up and ready to experience that new form of light because it has a kli. It's a kli for it. Before that, it was only a kli for the minimal light.
So in your mashal, really, what it is, you're saying that these little pockets of pure light are still filtered through the...
They're still filtered in the meantime.
The kav. And when we access it through the mitzvah, we're getting the pure light through the same mechanism, but it's just pure.
Through the same mechanism, yeah, because he doesn't undo the light of the kav in the meantime until such time as all the kelim are made and the vessel is ready to see something beyond itself.
And then surely our body then becomes elevated even in this world.
Even in this world, for sure. Even when you do a mitzvah, you elevate your body, even though you can't see it. You make a tremendous change upon yourself, and that's why it says mitzvah goreres mitzvah. One mitzvah leads to another mitzvah. Why? Is it like an automatic? $1 doesn't lead to another dollar. Sometimes $1 leads to no dollars. Mitzvah goreres mitzvah, because you've refined yourself through the performance of the mitzvah, that you basically launched yourself into the next mitzvah. You're a higher person who's now
you're a
shy
bigger
to doing
vessel
mitzvah.
that can create more.
And the more refined you are, though, the more you can see the light. It's more revealed.
I don't think so, because we're basically, it's like, there's a certain limitation of just being in this world, where we're all hiding behind the same curtain. You can't really. I don't think you can get.
So tzaddik wouldn't necessarily receive a different light than we
A
would.
tzaddik, though, is like a completely different type of being, But a Beinoni, for example, who may not experience any different light. He experienced, I think it's hard to say that. When you say light, okay, it's like there's even just a very human experience.
It's more a greater connection to Hashem.
I do believe, of course, he experienced a greater connection to Hashem. But when you say it's not like necessarily a visceral revelation of light. It's just that he's more paying attention, right? In other words, even if you're going to be in whatever field you're in, you want to be a chess master, okay? It's nothing to do with light, per se. It's just that the more you glue yourself to the game, the more you're just subtly aware of all the wondrous reality that's going on here. Whereas a novice comes in and watches a chess game, he really has no idea what's going on. And what's the difference? Like you like to talk about das, staying connected to something for a continuously long period of time. That's what gives you a new insight. Is it like a revelation of a new level of light? To some degree, I guess. It's like, but it's not supernatural necessarily. It's just what it means to be like a mature person. You spend a long time in something, you become attuned to it.
Sorry, last question. We learn in the morning prayer, the Torah keneged kulam.
Yeah.
Is the quality of the light of learning Torah from Tosefet different to the quality of light of the mitzvot?
It is a little bit. Because why is it Talmud Torah keneged kulam? Because
Torah is mitzvah.
What's that?
Torah is mitzvah.
Torah is also a mitzvah.
It contains all the mitzvot inside.
Well, no, it itself is a mitzvah, so it doesn't lack per se the quality of what we're talking about. Making there's laws of Talmud Torah. There's measurements of how much Torah, when, what gender you are, how old you are. It's all exactly limited like any other mitzvah. So it's mamash. But the advantage that it has is what?
It contains the mitzvot inside.
What's that? What's the advantage Talmud Torah has over all the other mitzvahs?
Keneged kulam. Keneged kulam.
No, it can do the mitzvahs that you can't do.
It's called betoch me'ai. It goes into you.
Oh.
The other mitzvahs, you wear them like a garment. Mitzvahs are called garments. Torah is called food.
So Hashem's Ivar, it's not actually him, versus Moach, which is like his
Right. The Ivarim, right? The idea of a garment is that when you're doing a mitzvah, your body and all of your limbs, like I was talking about before, just like with the non-Jews, like they become part of a kli which is holding infinite light. But it doesn't actually go inside of them because they're not understanding it. The mitzvah is not even relevant to understand. You put on a pair of tefillin, it's not shayach to understand that. It's a maisa, it's a deed. Deed is not in the realm of understanding, right? It's like a different breed. It's different universe. You know what I'm saying? Like it's, in other words, you can't understand a rock. It's a medium, a material, which is not shayach, the concept of perception. Where as soon as you go up from action, you go into speech, thought, emotions, intellect. These are all spiritual things which you grasp them inwardly in some way. So when you're learning the Torah, you have a whole different aspect of divinity which is available to you, which is that it comes inside of you, you can grasp with your mind. As opposed to grasping with your hands and esrog, you grasp it with your mind, so it goes in, that's why it's called food. So it's a completely different, it has the quality of mitzvah, but it's Talmud Torah keneged kulam because it has a completely, another advantage which none of the other mitzvahs have, which is that you get the penimius of Hashem as well. Yeah. Okay.
Rabbi.
Yeah.
So you said that you do a mitzvah and you can work the end of the light and you can crawl back to the original light.
Yeah.
So what if whatever you're doing is contaminated, either through lack of proper kavana or klipot? Does that mean you can't use that limits how far you can crawl up?
Well, it's like it says you can't build a sukkah from stolen materials, right? So there's certain things that can block you from performing the mitzvah. Depends what level of contamination you're talking about. If it's tuma, simple contamination, like someone touched a dead body and touched it, there's ways that you can still use that for a mitzvah. You can still eat it. You can still make a bracha on it. Food that's contaminated is not prohibited you from doing a mitzvah with it.
So maybe you could crawl part way, but not as much as if somebody was a tzaddik, then they probably have, it's like a freeway.
Yeah, I mean, it depends what you're talking about. In other words, when it comes to performance of a mitzvah, which immediately gives you access to this higher light, as long as you perform a mitzvah and it's kosher, you made a kli for this light, right? In other words, there's different levels of the mitzvah. Like tzedakah, it says there's 10 levels of how you give tzedakah. The person gives it, he doesn't know. The person receiving it doesn't know, etc., etc., etc. So there's more polished and refined ways to do the mitzvah. And what that means is you're making more and more vessels. In other words, it says, for example, when Moshe and Korach, got into their little thing. Where it says the machlokas was with Korach ve'edah, so he and his own people started to quarrel and get in a fight with Moshe. Aaron comes in and he says, or Moshe comes in and he says, Boker ve'edah. He says, in the morning we will know. Right? And the idea is that he says that Boker is the idea of like brightness and clearness. And he was saying that it's a whole sikha, but since I already started, I'll go into it. He says basically like this, that what was Korach's claim? Right? That Korach comes right after Parshas Shalach. And Parshas Shalach is the idea that you can't stay in the desert. You have to go into the land, because as high as the revelations you can get in the desert, the mitzvahs, which are physical, are more exactly what we're discussing here. Like you can have all the great lights of the Kaab all the way up to Ak, but it's nothing compared to one simple mitzvah that a Jew can perform in this physical world, because there you get the infinite light. So he was explaining to them the sin of the spies, that they had to go into the land because mitzvahs are above all. So Korach comes with his argument. This is the Rebbe's Sikha, it's brilliant. Korach comes with his argument. What does he say? He says, oh, Moshe Rabbeinu, if it's all about mitzvahs, and everybody does the mitzvahs the same, because as we just said a minute ago, deed is deed. There's no intellect in deed. There's no levels of deed. This guy puts on his tefillin, this guy puts on his tefillin. If that's the case, what do we need you for? I'll be in charge, because or whoever. It's like, in other words, you just equalize the playing field, that you get the infinite light through the lowest place, and the lowest place is equal to everybody. But Boker v'yedah, the truth is, Moshe answers him. He says, sorry, it's not like that. Even on the level of deed, there's a deed which is called Boker, and there's a deed which is called Laila. And yes, it has to do with your kavanas and the purity of your person. And what does it really mean is that you're able to, what is a deed doing? As we said, it's taking the physical world and it's turning it into a kli for Hashem. So the cleaner and more refined that you can make the physical world, the more and more deeply you can affect this world. It says, for example, talking about Tumah, there were some people in the Gemara that used to eat their chulin al taras hakodesh. What does it mean, chulin al taras hakodesh? Raise your hand if you know. Yeah. So basically, the Torah of Kodesh means that a piece of meat that comes out of the base of Mikdash, very many things can make it tamei. Even things which are barely tamei in themselves, because the Kodesh is such a precious thing. The rabbis put all kinds of extra stringencies. They made things rabbinically contaminated, so that if it touches, in other words, if it, like, let's say I touch a person touches a dead body, and that person touches someone, and that person touches someone, and that person touches someone. So really, Al Pi Torah, they're pure at that level. They've gone so far away from the Tumah. But for Kodesh, they have to still become purified, because they made extra stringencies that you should only eat this food with the ultimate stringency of. So, you understand what I'm saying? So some sages, which are on such a high level, they ate their chulin, they ate regular food, which was not coming from the base of Mikdash, al taras hakodesh, on the same stringencies and precautions that people would eat kodesh with. So they went around like affecting the world in a way of unbelievable purity that a regular person did not. And that's the idea of Moshe Rabbeinu. It's like there is even a difference between one person's mitzvahs and another one, even though in general a mitzvah is a mitzvah. And I guess the idea is not like you get higher or lower, it's that you're making more or less keli. You know, what does it mean to make a kli? You're taking a part of the world and you're making it a kli for the Or Ein Sof. So the deeper you can probe into sort of the minutiae of the world, the more essentially broad and spacious your kli is. Like, for example, you do a mitzvah without kavanah, you were able to affect the physical part of the world, but not the brain motions and the activity in your brain is not refined, because you didn't do a mitzvah with the activity in your brain. You only did the mitzvah with the activity in your hand. So a mitzvah itself has so many components to it. So depending on how righteous you are and how detailed of a job you're doing with the mitzvah, it's not that you get a higher level or lower level. You just bring this. You've measured yet another aspect of the mitzvah, another aspect of the mitzvah. So you have more kalim of that infinite light.
And the higher level you are, the greater accountability you have for what one would consider minor transgressions.
That's also true, because you have access to them. You have access to doing it right. A person who's a simple person, he has no difference between doing a mitzvah behidr or doing a mitzvah not behidr. So in the meantime, he's not expected to do it like that. So lamashal. Okay. Anyway, that was a long round of questions. No more questions. You have a question? Okay, so going back inside. Medida the Torah mitzvahs. We're talking about the difference between measuring the Seder Ishtalshlus and measuring the mitzvahs. And after the parenthesis, aval medida the Torah mitzvahs, the measure which takes place in the mitzvahs, husha etzem moded umagbi with atzmu. It's not that the light is being measured by an opposite force and literally reducing it, but it's that the essence, unchanged and unreduced, is in self giving itself a description, a limitation. As atzmo, it limits itself. Lios atzmuso nimshach b'makom she'enu be'erech klal. Meaning what? So that now its essence, as it is, undiluted, diluted, can be drawn down into another place, like the top of the flashlight can find its way down to the bottom. And therefore, in this type of measurement, the light is not measured and limited. In other words, not reduced. Not in its essential being. In other words, it doesn't get smaller, not in quantity or quality. Maybe a little bit in quantity actually, but it winds up not mattering because it's the same essential light. Yeah. So, but it doesn't get smaller and doesn't change. Let's put it like that. It doesn't change its quality. And also in its being drawing down. In other words, not only when you limit it does it not change its quality, but even when it gets drawn down, it does not change its quality. Whereas normally when you draw something down, it gets further away from the source, it gets dimmer and dimmer. So in this type of measuring, there's no change in its essential quality, nor in what happens when you draw it down. As it says at great length in the famous Hemshech Yom Tov Shel Rosh Hashanah, Ranat. Now, in conclusion, this is what we call drawing from the second level of Tosefes light, a light which is beyond the Kav, the infinite light, the Penimius of the Orient Soul. Shetosefto shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu meruba la'ikr. Right? There's this idea that Tosefes meruba la'ikr, that when you add something, it's the idea that it's you had a basic principle, and the Tosefes that you're adding on to the principle. And Hashem's also, his add-on is greater than his principle. Shezeu b'chinas or atzmid la'atzmos Orient Sof. Meaning what? It's a whole different sug of light. It's the essential light of the Orient Sof. Shemizeh nimshach b'chinas gili or ba'olmos. And what does this do ultimately? It enables you to have a level of light which is beyond the measured amount of light of the worlds inside of the worlds. Because he can add on to his principle. His principle is that every world gets what they're supposed to get, and with this tefes, he can add on to the principle. Okay, going on. Page Ayin Zayin. Vehine beis minei hamshachas hanal. These two levels of hamshachas shoresh and tosefes, hein beis minei yichudim da'ab ve'ima. These represent two unifications of Abba and Ima, Chochma and Bina. Chochma and Bina need to unify. Right? Just like the father and mother. You don't have children unless there's a unification of the father and mother. But there's two forms of unification of Abba and Ima, and based on them, they represent these two different levels of light that we just discussed. Yichud chitzoni, v'yichud panimi. Right? There's a external unification and an inner unification. Yichud chitzoni, da'av ve'imahu zivaigehu, tamidi l'tzorach kiyum ha'olmos. That what is their external unification? Is that their partnership, their bond is continuous for the sake of the establishment of the worlds. In other words, if for a second there would be a disconnect between Abba and Ima, it means the light of the Orient Sof would not have a kli to go through and be internalized into the Bina, which just means there's just be a cessation of the worlds, right? In other words, stopping them from being together, even in the most external sense, means there would be no more light coming into the worlds.
Is it a back-to-back?
It could be. He doesn't say that here, but it's similar to what we were saying before. Yeah, it seems like it's pretty much what he's saying.
It's a continuous light for the sake of the world?
It's a continuous light for the sake of bringing the worlds into being. No more. And yeah, essentially that's exactly what we've been talking about. This is the back-to-back idea. Set, and that's what it means, it's tamidus. Like they never, when they're back-to-back, they never leave each other. But he says, even though it's continuous, which is a nice quality, she'einu nifsak, it never stops. Old kol yimei haaretz zera v'katzir, like we learned, this was the covenant was made essentially to the non-Jews. Right? This is the covenant of Noach. That when Hashem destroyed the world, He made a covenant. I'm never going to do that again. The world will continue. So that's a certain covenant that He made, a bond. A covenant is a bond, but this is a different type of bond. It's an external bond. Shenimshach tamid below hefsek, which goes all the time going and never ends. Ki yidu the chokhmah bina hen bechinas ayin v'yesh. Chokhmah and bina is called also ayin and yesh. Bina is yesh, chokhmah is ayin.
Is it the internal? Or?
This is the external. We're talking about the external. V'tamid nimshach me'ayin the chokhmah liyesh the bina. And it has to be that there's for there to be a world, there has to always be some type of energy coming out from the ayin to make the yesh. The world is called yesh ma'ayin, right? Which means the yesh is a product in some way of the ayin. It's a weird type of product because none of the ayin comes into it. That's why it's called ayin. But obviously some type of minuscule, that's a conversation in itself. What actually is transferred? Because the notion of yesh ma'ayin is that it's a full stop, right? But this all of a sudden engenders a new power of God, that even when there's no light shining, there can all of a sudden become existence on the other end of it. And that's what we call yesh ma'ayin, something from nothing. But the idea is there is a flow from the nothing to the something, perpetuating the world at all times. And this obviously can't go away. So the yesh is the bina and the ayin is the chokhmah. If they're not attached to each other, there's no yesh ma'ayin. There's no existence. V'zeu yishavas yesh ma'ayin. That's what it means. The yesh comes out of the ayin. Mikom makom ein b'zeh yischadshus. However, there's nothing new here. She'einu nimshach b'zeh gilei or chadash. Meaning to say, so long as the creation is in place, he's already sort of determined the entirety of creation from the get-go. And everything that's ever going to be is already there in like a pool of light, which has been set up and established for existence from the beginning. Reishis Chochmah, in the beginning, he already established the entirety of the world. So while that world in our perspective has to go through 6,000 years of history, really the 6,000 years of history is already sitting in the 6 spheres of Atzilus, just waiting to come out drop by drop by drop in our timeline. But there's nothing new there. It's not a new novel thing to the creation itself. To us it's novel. But in essence, it's already there.
How do you resolve this with predetermination and free will then? If it's already there, then it implies there's no free will.
There's not as much as you think, first of all. And second of all, there's another aspect of light. If it was just this light, there would be no free will. And there is no free will to almost every single thing in creation, except for a handful of select individuals. The reason we have free will is because we can choose to be enlivened by this light or the other light. But those who do not have that choice, they do not have free will.
But if we choose to do the right thing, then we change the nature of existence? Or the nature of existence is already predetermined?
We add something to the nature of existence. No, the nature of existence which was predetermined gets redetermined. That's what it means. It's a chiddush. When you just are
that's the internal.
It's the internal. That's the internal fusion of chokhmah and bina. Okay. So that's really our choice. Which pool of light we want to take from, but not that even if we take from the other pool of light, it's not really
but
free
it does
choice.
Make a difference
in the sense that the world that's going to be enlivened by that light is also basically it's Hashem's energy. It's not you. You're just choosing to switch the track of the train.
Right.
That's your choice, and it is a choice.
But it does make a difference.
It's a mighty choice.
What you do makes a difference.
100%. But not what you do, in other words, for your profession. Or not what type of shirt you're going to pull out of the closet this morning. Because all that is taka predetermined. What's different is whether Giloi Elokus is going to be taking place in the moment that you're pulling your shirt out of the closet. Or in the moment that you go to work in the morning. Because you're going to be utilizing a different type of measurement in your life, measuring how Torah mitzvahs comes into this finite space. That's your choice. And if you don't want to measure Torah mitzvahs into your finite space, you just want to draw from the predetermined light, you're just a robot, basically.
Yeah. You're inanimate.
Okay, so going on, there's no hischadshus in this light. When it comes to the continuous light of creation, it's not. There's nothing novel. It's just a ray of divinity, which quite frankly, he's already siphoned this ray out of himself, way up inside the Ratzon HaElyon to create the world even before the Tzimtzum. But he's already determined what all the worlds are going to be, and you're just living out that ray. And basically, even if you're going to say that it's new, because we do say that Hashem is continuously re-enlivening the creation. So how does that fit in with this? Right? In other words, every moment Hashem is turning the flashlight on all over again. So there is some chiddush of just reality that it didn't just put it here and walk away. But even when he's being mechadesh it and bringing it forth again, he's just bringing it forth from that same light that he's already determined. In other words, it's from a pool of light that's already finitely assigned to the world. So, okay, he churns it out again, but it's not something essentially different. It's not a new light. It's just a return of the old light. And this is what's called drawing forth from the kav. So it's a direct parallel to what we've just been saying. The kav light is the external fusion of chokhmah and bina. The klalus ha'ara nimdada v'nigbal lefi erech ha'olamos, which means the whole shine is measured and limited in order to reduce itself enough to bring into existence different and lower realms of creation. That's the idea of limiting the light. The more you limit the light, the more you experience yesh on the other side. Right? We said in the very beginning, if Hashem is shining, nothing else is shining. So he limits himself at intervals so he can continuously create a feeling of other at various levels down the Hishtalshlus. And the way that this external fusion of Chochmah and Bina works is that it's coming in a limited measured way. It gets lower at every level. And eventually at the lowest level, the light becomes completely vacant, absent. At the bottom, there's absolutely no more revelation of this light. So just like it is at the union of the Chokhmah and the Bina, father and the mother, there's also the same situation that comes down at the unification of the mother and the children. Yichud Zun is the Spheros and Malchus, the 6 Spheros and Malchus. They also have a whole other need to bond. It's basically like the husband and the wife here, like you could say like the chassan and the kala, right? You're the father and the mother and the chassan and the kala. So the same thing happens. In other words, when the light goes into when Bina will finally accept the light from Chokhmah, which is a continuous renewal, but it's only the external aspect of the renewal, which means it's not a chiddush light. It's a continuous light that was set aside originally for the creation. This then goes shining into the next level down, Zah, and then Zah also has a fusion and a union with Malchus. And this too can be in these two ways, where it can be besod shoresh or besod tosefes. Chitzonius and panemius, which means it's dealing with hishtalshelus light, or it can be dealing with panemius light. So when it comes down to, it goes down the pike, and it also goes into zun, zah nukva bebechinis chitzonius shelahem, in their external aspects. And we already spoke about this. This is what happens when only the lower aspect of Zah, Nehi, Netzach Hod Yisod, remember this conversation, that's all that's given over to Malchus. Zah holds back its light and gives only its external expression to Malchus. Why did this happen? Why is Zah acting this way? Because it also only experienced the external aspect of Bina and so forth. In other words, once you're dealing with only a measured light, then each time you go down, it only also gives off its lowest level. The lowest one of the highest one comes and it becomes the highest one of the lowest one, and that continues to happen. So it's a continuous minimization, that in each stage it goes from high to low, and therefore by the time it unites with the one below it, it's only giving over its lowest part.
So Bina and Chokhmah go to Zah and
Nukva.
Rabbi.
Yeah.
The chitzoniot, so they mating all the time. But the pnimiut, what is the quality? What it says?
The panemius is the quality which is the Or Ein Sof light. It's the panemius of the Or. At its root, it's the tosefes. It's beyond the kav. It's beyond measure. It's basically Torah and mitzvahs.
So the Torah mitzvah coming from Yichud, the Abba ve'Ima of the pnimiut, and everything else from the chitzoniot.
No, we're going to see, but once you tap into the panemius. The panemius is able to... This
cup is not from the chitzoniot?
What's that?
This cup.
It depends what you're doing with it. If you're just holding a cup up and having a sip, maybe. But if you're using it as a mushal to understand Chassidus, you know what I'm saying? At that moment, you're in the midst of doing a mitzvah with that cup. then you can change it. Don't think it's so strange. Look for a second, right? A fruit is growing on a tree.
No, I
For
guess.
the first 3 years, it's gimel klippos atameis.
Yes.
Which means what's enlivening it is mamish one level of it. The second it turns 4 years old, that day, it's now, it has a kedusha.
But the quality of the Torah and mitzvah, that there is no sitra achra there. Okay, like in lehefech mizeh, that it is possible there is sitra achra there. Understand what I mean? You cannot do with the tefillin. I guess you cannot nimshoch something bad as a law of spirituality.
Sure you can. You can wear them into the bathroom. And all of a sudden, at that moment, you're in the midst of an avera, and you and the tefillin and everything that's involved in activity has just cut off the light of mitzvah and has embodied the light of world, and not only world, but a very concealed aspect of world, to the point that you're doing hepech hakavana of the Ratzon HaElyon with something which is of the Ratzon HaElyon. The Rabbi speaks about it, that this is like the lowest thing you can do. You can do an avera with a mitzvah. Like he says, like when they came to Eretz Yisrael and they wanted to try and create a secular country in Eretz Yisrael, it's like doing an avera with a mitzvah. Right? You can't go lower than that.
Uganda.
It would have been better if they went to Uganda, according to that. If you're going to do avera, do it in Uganda. Don't do it in Eretz HaKodesh.
Does that nukva produce malchut?
Yeah, nukva is malchus. Nukva is malchus.
So what do they produce?
They ultimately produce the world, right? From malchus produces bria tzir nasiya. You with me, Yitzchak?
Yes, I'm thinking about it.
That's why I used the mashal of the fruit in the first 3 years. The same object, depending on when or where or why, it's all of a sudden it's a completely different object. This is what the world has really no perception of. We don't see this.
Yeah, but you said in the beginning of the class that like the Torah and mitzvot have the quality of tzimtzum, but not reducing of God. Like they're always.
I didn't say tzimtzum, medida.
I'm sorry, medida, of course.
Right.
Everything is mitzvah, but they are like the mitzvah is a pure essence from Atzilut that just behind Atzilut that mitlabesh in this world. Okay, and everything else is of course also medida and reduction, and like it's a poor reflection of whatever there is there.
It's a minimization.
So I don't know. I guess I was trying to think to put in my to find the quality of this tchuna, and by the fact that this cannot have tuma in it because it's so high.
But it can.
But if it can, so I have nothing.
Yeah. Okay. You have everything. Let's say one more line. We'll wrap it up here. So this is the idea. When you go to the external unification of Chochmah and Bina, that leads to the external unification of Zah and Nukva, and you're basically going that everything is in a constant state of descent.
So it's basically doing mitzvahs every day, or it's
Mitzvahs every second, every instant you can do.
every instant we bring this external light. We have this.
No. If you're not doing a mitzvah, then the external light is happening by itself. It's a continuous promise from God. He's not going to stop this light once Noah came into the world, right? He's not going to stop this light. So there's a constant expression of the spiritual light, limiting itself, but shining, but in a limited, so it pops out us at the bottom. We're never going to stop being here. But all that is just worldly light.
So it's only our physical bodies that come from that unification.
The physical body, yeah. And the animal soul even.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. This is called, yes, he says achor ba'achor, right? This is the back-to-back. Shanikra b'shem achor ba'achor. That's what you mentioned. That's exactly right? So it's a back-to-back relationship. What is back-to-back again, right? Go back to our original concept. Back-to-back means the back of the mashpia. The lowest part of the mashpia. His ability to bring a mashal and bring himself down to the level of the student so that he looks indistinguishable from the student at his lowest place. That's as much as you ever get of the rabbi in this model. So the light, it doesn't reveal its true powers at the lower train stops. The Bir Zohar Achrei Al Maimon Zohar Daf Amid Ayin Zayin Amid Beis Bagos L'Sham. Okay, you have to look over there for further elucidation. Aval Yichud Penimi Da'av Ve'ima. We'll get to tomorrow. It's now we're going to talk about the inner unification of them.
We didn't talk about it.
We didn't do it yet. We're going to start tomorrow.
Yeah, I should go ahead.
Yeah.
At least we'll finish the moment.
Let's see, can we? Tomorrow?